everybody, my name's Julia from Bobbins and Buttons, and today I'm going to show you different methods for finishing the edge of a facing. So just as an example of what I'm talking about, I've got this boxy top turned inside out to show you the neck facing. So facings can be on different parts of the garment, so these techniques can work across all sorts of different facings. I'm going to show you methods that some use an overlocker and some don't, and I'll also talk about where I think each method is most suitable for. So just before I start showing the different methods, I wanted to mention that most facing pieces will probably have interfacing on the reverse. So I like to think of the edge finishing as a two-part process. One that you're going to create a nice neat finish that will also be easy to wash without fraying away, but also that you're going to be giving extra security to hold your interfacing to the reverse of your facing piece. So for this first method, this is my go-to quick, simple, reliable method, but this one does involve using an overlocker. So if you don't have an overlocker, obviously this one isn't much use to you, but it is a really neat, easy finish, and all it is just simply overlocking around the edge of your facing piece. And like I said, it holds together your interfacing to the back of the facing piece nice and neatly. It's flat, so it doesn't create too much bulk, especially on lightweight fabrics where you don't want to see a line through the garment. It's really useful for that as well. So if you're not too keen on the overlock edge finish just being left as it is, you can actually turn this in and just stitch it down. So I think that's quite a nice finish if you're doing something like an unlined jacket where you'll see the edge of the facing when the jacket's open. So to do this, I'm just going to turn and press the edge in, pressing along the inner edge of the overlock stitching, and then we'll stitch along on the outer, closer to the outer edge. So there we go. It's quite a neat finish, and it's holding the overlock stitching down quite nicely, and if that was interfaced, that would all be held in place as well. So if you don't have an overlocker, you can do a fairly similar thing with a regular sewing machine and a zigzag stitch. So I think this is quite a good option for dresses and tops that have neck facings or other internal facings that you won't necessarily see as you would for something like a jacket. So to do this, if you start by setting your zigzag length and width both to a medium, and then when you're sewing, I like to try and aim the stitch so it just comes off the edge, so it's almost acting as an overlocker, and it's just pulling the edge in slightly so that you don't have any raw fabric beyond the stitch line. So for the purposes of washing a garment, you've got all your raw edges finished there, but it doesn't look quite as pretty as an overlocker. But like I said, we can now go ahead and do what we did on the last one and just turn this in and stitch that line up with a straight stitch. I've pressed that edge in, and now I'm going to turn the machine back to straight stitch and just stitch that exactly as I did for the overlocker version. And there we go. The one thing I would say about this method is it is much easier to work on fabrics that are quite crisp and medium weight to lightweight fabrics such as cotton lawn or cotton poplin. Something with polyester that is quite bouncy, you might find you struggle to press in that tiny size hem edge. This next method doesn't involve any zigzag or overlocker, it's just straight stitch. So this is quite good as well for curved edges on lighter weight fabrics like a cotton voile for example, but it is a little bit more tricky to do. So to start with, I'm going to stitch around about 5mm away from the raw edge, just with a straight line. So for very narrow edges like this, I tried to find a point on the machine foot that I can use as a gauge against my raw edge when I'm stitching to help keep that nice and even. So what I'm going to do now is take this to the iron and I'm going to press where the stitch line is. I've pressed in the edge along the stitch line, and then what I've done is I've folded that in again against the raw edge of that little turning, so that I've got a double turned very narrow hem. So what I'm going to do now is stitch on this inner edge. But what I would say about this method is it is better for fabrics that will fold in quite easily, like cotton or lightweight fabrics. It's probably not so good for bulky fabrics or fabrics with a lot of polyester content that will be very bouncy and springy and won't fold easily. So I'm going to find a gauge on my foot to help me keep a nice straight line and just stitch that around. There we go. Nice double turned edge. So this next finish doesn't use an overlocker or a zigzag stitch. I'm going to use bias binding to finish this edge. So this is really nice for things like inside a jacket, front facing, where you're likely to see your binding. So I've used a decorative binding just to illustrate that, because sometimes it's nice to have that sort of extra designer finish. But you could use this method in all sorts of areas of different garments. So to start with, I'm going to pin the raw edge of the binding to the raw edge of the facing, and I'm just going to pin inside the fold, which is where I'm going to stitch. So now what I'm going to do is take it to the iron, and I'm just going to press this folded edge over to meet the stitch line that I've just created, so that we're going to have a nice neat finished edge around there. If you didn't want to see the binding, what you could do is actually fold, you can still fold that in, but you can fold it in again so that you get a neat edge. This is probably going to only be suitable if your facing isn't going to show through the garment, because it will be quite bulky, so probably not so suitable for tops, top neck facings and things like that. But for this version I want to see the edging, so I'm just going to press that and pin it to the stitch line here. I'm now going to stitch this inside edge along quite close to the edge, so it keeps it nicely held in place. There we go, a nice neatly finished edge. This last method is one that I actually haven't done before, but it popped up in Threads magazine, which is an excellent magazine, and I just thought it was genius, so I wanted to include it in this video. So I've cut the facing, the interfacing, the same size as the facing as you normally would do, and I've pinned the fabrics right side together. So what I'm going to do now is just stitch the two together around the outer edge. I'm just going to use a 1 cm seam allowance for this. Now, depending on the fabric and the interfacing you're using, you may need to just trim a little bit of that away before you turn and press. It did mention in Threads magazine that this is only really suitable for light to medium weight fabrics, which I would agree with really, because this could be quite bulky if you're trying to turn this edge. So for the purpose of this video, I'm just going to turn and press this and show you how that looks. So I've turned and pressed that, and it's just a really lovely neat finish. I used non-fusible interfacing for this. Like I said, I haven't tried it before. I'd imagine you're going to have to get your parts very neatly together if you did use fusible, but it works really, really nicely with non-fusible. So I think that's a really great method. So there we go, lots of different techniques to finish the edge of your facing with and without an overlocker, and with and without a zigzag stitch. So I hope you enjoyed that tutorial. If you did, please don't forget to give it a thumbs up, and if you'd like to see more videos, please don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel. Thanks for watching.